Welcome to My Life Chassidus Applied, episode 474. Another special Israel at War edition. Good Yom Tes. We're at the conclusion of Yud Tes Kislev, the Chag HaGeula of the Alter Rebbe. 225 years ago, the year 1798, Tov Kuf Nun Tes, that the Alter Rebbe was arrested, false charges, but nevertheless arrested, and for 53 days was in prison, and finally was freed. So how appropriate in dealing with the battles of our time to invoke and to draw strength from that battle. We also are in the week of Chanukah, another battle and another victory. So all that will be part of our discussion in this special edition. This program is dedicated in loving memory of Miriam Bas Eliyahu Altes, Allah Shalom, and Emerita Baruch ben Yomim ben Menucha Lana Altes, Yekusiel ben Leah Rachel Bas Liba Farkas, dedicated by Pinchas Tadris, by Miriam and Sarah Bas Rachel Altes. So, the war wages on, sadly. The enemies have not been eradicated yet. We all pray and hope with our hearts and souls for those soldiers that sacrifice themselves every moment to protect and defend the innocent men, women, and children in our holy land. God should protect them, release all the hostages unscathed, and may there be finally permanent shalom al Yisrael and shalom in the whole world. But as we have been speaking about week after week, based on the fundamental principle that we are not bystanders, in the words of the Rambam, when a catastrophe, when something happens, and you are a witness and you are aware of it, it would be cruel and insensitive, achzarius, to see it as a random event. It's a wake-up call of introspection, soul-searching, doing whatever we can, coupled with the military side of the war, the spiritual side of the war, which is our involvement. So we need to mobilize ourselves as soldiers, and therefore a program like this, My Life Chassidus Applied, take Chassidus, Torah, everything we've learned, everything we know, and apply it to the situation on the ground. And it's all a big partnership, meaning different forces, different departments, all combining to ultimately vanquish and eliminate all threats, all evil, and bring in a much greater good than ever before, and ultimately the goodness of Mashiach and the Geula itself. That's the Jewish approach, and that's what's always worked for thousands of years. And we're here now. So we have a tremendous role to play in our own clarity, in our own commitment, conviction, our proactive reaching out to others, as we see happening in the world today. And those of you following this program see that we've been doing this now since right after Simchas Torah. This is the platform that I use all my abilities to fulfill this very mission. And hopefully each of you will do exactly the same, each in our own unique way. Okay. So with that, let's structure in some organized manner. Many, many questions have come in. Simply just too much to handle in one program. So I'm trying to compartmentalize them, to separate them, to scatter them, so to speak. But always beginning with the most timely, and that is the events that are happening right now. The fact that we're coming from Yud Tes and Tes Kislev, Chag HaGeula, where the Alter Rebbe had to face his adversaries and came out victorious. The fact that later in this week will be Chanukah, which is yet another battle. So these are not just historical events, they give us tremendous power. We learn from them. We draw from them. So let's begin with that. Essentially, with the number one issue being how Yud Tes Kislev provides us with strength and direction in these trying times. And then we'll move over to Chanukah, simply in order of the weekly events. So as I mentioned, and let's elaborate a bit more, Yud Tes Kislev took place in Tsarist Russia. Russia at the time was at war with the Ottoman Empire, Turkey, and those enemies of the Alter Rebbe, which is another discussion of its own, informed on the Alter Rebbe that he was being treasonous by supporting Turkey, which was the archenemy of the Tsar. In what fashion? Because Eretz Yisrael, the Promised Land at the time, was under their control. So the Alter Rebbe was sending tzedakah to Eretz Yisrael, as we know. There were Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe that went there. So that was like supporting the enemy. Obviously, is unfounded, but that was the way it was positioned. And also the Alter Rebbe himself was a leader and seen and described to the people of the Tsar as a threat to the Tsar's rule and monarchy. That was the ostensible reason. But as I said before about catastrophes and tragedies, nothing is just ostensible. The Alter Rebbe and the Chassidim saw this as a challenge in heaven to the way he was spreading Chassidus. He was explaining it, Chabad, in a way that even the animal soul, even the very human intelligence that's engaged and involved in material life could also understand the divine. And this was a big thing because this is how you bring Mashiach, how you bring Geula, by transforming the world. So there will always be resistance and pushback. And that was the real meaning behind it. So then 53 days later, when he was vindicated and was released and exonerated from all the charges, it was seen as also a sign from heaven that his method is also vindicated, that not only did he continue, but as the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid told the Alter Rebbe, even more than ever before, Yefutzim Anesecha Chutza, the spreading of the wellsprings outward. This program wouldn't exist were it not for Yud Tes Kislev, and neither would any of the teaching of Chassidus that we have today, in ways that have transformed thousands, millions of lives, and transformed the very world in which we live, all due to this day. So you see how a setback, how an enemy brought out the greatest strengths. The Rebbe Rashab says it's difficult to say, but Yud Tes Kislev was like zayis, the oil, the olive. Ein meitzi shamne achakechinese. Doesn't produce oil until you press it. So he says it's hard to say because we're talking about the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe being the olive, the pressure, the challenge, being in prison. You can imagine the anguish involved in that. Brought out the deepest oil of the Primis HaTeira, rosin de rosin, which is compared to oil. Pure oil, from which we light the menorah. What that tells us is that the battles we're facing today, with the adversaries of our time, the same is true. That at the moment, things can be painful. There have been losses, tragic losses, and we don't minimize that. But the story is that all of us will lead to the production of such oil that has never ever been produced. We see it already. You see the love, the unity, the efforts. I mean, were it not for the painful events, this would be like one of the most noblest and glorious moments in our history. And obviously we want to maintain that. And what we want to have is a distant memory of the pain, and the only thing that should shine would be the oil that was produced. So firstly, it's a lesson in hope that we've been here already before. That's not a comfort necessarily, that we've been here, but not that we've been here and we have not just survived but thrived. And the mere fact that it was a challenge connected to Eretz Yisrael, because they were accusing of the Alter Rebbe of supporting Eretz Yisrael, which was, so to speak, the enemy. If you think deeper, in a way it was the enemy, but not the way they thought. It wasn't because he was supporting Turkey or the Ottoman Empire. He was supporting Jews that were struggling in the Holy Land. But the Holy Land represents the antithesis and the alter ego and the diametric opposite of a material world, of an arrogant czar and his empire. So in a way it was a threat. It was the threat that the Alter Rebbe, like Mordechai before him, would not bow. He answered to a higher calling, to a higher God. Like Mordechai would not bow to Haman. That was the real threat. But it's not a threat that would in any way disturb the czar, if he understood it. It was because it was essentially the Alter Rebbe is bringing Gettlichkeit into the world. And Gettlichkeit is a threat. Godliness is a threat to a world that wants to worship itself and its own power and its own wealth and its own material strength. But who prevailed? The Alter Rebbe. And today there's no longer Tsarist Russia, but we have Chassidus. We have 7 generations of it. Go into a little more specifics. So let's talk about the details. So we know when the Alter Rebbe says, when he heard about the release, when he was told that he would be released, he was in the middle of saying, the third day of the week, Tuesday, the kapitel until in Padah B'shalom Nafshi, mikrovli. So what is the significance of the Alter Rebbe saying that? So we know that the Rabbeim explained to us, and many Maimorim connected to Yud Tes Kislev are this pasuk in Tehillim. Padah B'shalom Nafshi mikrovli. My soul was redeemed in peace from mikrov, from the word krov is from battles, from my enemies, from my wars. And the intention is b'shalom, because you can come out of a battle, you can be victorious, but it was with a real battle, and blood was shed, God forbid, and lives were lost. The Alter Rebbe's case, it was b'shalom. Yes, he did have anguish and did have plenty of pain during those 53 days, but he came out intact. And that's the ultimate goal. As Chassidus explains that there's 2 ways to have a podah, a pidyon. Pidyon is also the word pidyon shvoim for the release of hostages, prisoners. Could be a pidyon, not b'shalom or mechama. Could be a pidyon b'shalom, and that's what the goal is. It should be menucha in a peaceful way. I understand that today we can't say it's complete b'shalom because there have been lives lost, people injured, plenty of pain. But our hope is that it should end up being Padah B'shalom in the fullest possible way. So as someone wrote, is it significant that the Alter Rebbe was notified he was being released right before he said the words Padah B'shalom Nafshi in Tehillim? Is there a lesson here that Hashem sends the redemption even before you daven for it? Can we apply a similar idea to the current war, that Hashem will redeem us in peace and peace will be restored in Israel? Absolutely. Is it exactly in the same fashion? No, not necessarily. But the overall picture, absolutely. So Padah B'shalom Nafshi. And as the Rebbe would bring often, the Gemara in Brachos, Padah B'shalom Nafshi. And how do we experience that? Through Teira, Vedic Mils Chasadim. Like he says, Kola Esek B'Teira V'Lum Kilu Poda'ani Li U'Lebanem Mi'Bein U'Meseilam. How do you free yourself from the clutches of the nations that attack us? It's through Teira, Aveda, Gmil, Chasad, the 3 pillars. And that indeed right there tells you that part of the war is those 3 things, Teira, Aveda, Gmil, Chasad. Yes, we have to fight a physical war. That's part of the reality on the ground. Just like Yaakov prepared himself for actual war, he didn't have to end up fighting the war, thank God. It was enough, the matana, the appeasement, the bribe, the gift he gave, together with his prayer. We too need Teira Vedi Mils Chasam together with the battles that have to be fought. So there you have one of the lessons, both the lesson of hope and knowing that we will prevail, and also the method of how we will prevail. Because when you learn Torah, and you daven, you pray, and you give Gemilas Chasadim, that's a Padah B'shalom. You're not going with a physical sword. Those are spiritual weapons. So that adds the ability for those fighting the war on the ground, the physical sense, that they too should be empowered with a spiritual power that gives even more strength to eliminate the enemy with the least amount of loss and the most amount of shalom. Ultimately, the ultimate shalom. Okay. So another person asked, what can we derive from the Tanya we learn these days? So we know that in this structure of Chitas, Chumash, Tehillim, and Tanya, so we conclude the Tanya right before Yud Tes Kislev on the 18th of Kislev, and then we begin from the beginning on the 19th of Kislev. So someone writes, toward the end of the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe gives us a suggestion for what is the best way to daven with a group, a minyan. Can we ask Rabbi Jacobson to please give a review of this? Because even though there's no wrong way to daven and Hashem hears every prayer, during these dark days of war, if we can accomplish more by davening the best possible way, then we should certainly try to do so. So let's talk both the end of Tanya and the beginning of Tanya, because they're both in these days. So indeed, in the end, the last siman, the last section from Kunter Sachen, Hechiach Techiach, where he talks about a very heartfelt way of how prayer has to be done properly, and he's hearing it's not proper. How it has to be in unison, coordinated, a synergy, and the one who's leading the prayer shouldn't go too fast, shouldn't go too slow, and should pray with kavanah, not just get up there and just to lead. At a very basic level. Why? Because prayer is avodah shebelev, as he says, from the Gemara. Pray, service of the heart. When you speak from your heart, you have to speak in a certain way. You don't just do it in a flippant way. So the first very basic lesson is, davening like a mensch, davening the way a person should daven. A little more patience, not rushing. I remember meeting someone years ago, first time he ever came to a shul. And he saw that right after davening, everyone ran out. And this was a person who had never davened in a regular shul. He said to me, these words, he said, it would seem to me that they should be running into the shul and not wanting to leave so fast. They're in such a holy environment. Why are they running out so fast? You run to things that are important to you. So I understand people have to go to work and other things, and I explained that to him. But it was just a hergish that I think worthwhile sharing. And Alter Rebbe says that's the focus. So of course, in a time like this when we're davening, so every tefillah counts in any way you can say, with a minyan, without a minyan, individually saying Tehillim. But very fitting, the Alter Rebbe is saying it's one of the three things, Torah, Vedic, Gemilas Chasadim, that brings Padah B'shalom. Then comes the beginning of Tanya. The beginning of Tanya, we start right away with the Sharblat, the cover page. That this Sefer, which Melukat Mipi Seferim Mipi Svarim, is miyusad, is founded on, based on the Posek Yikarev Elecha Davar Me'ed B'ficha B'vav Chala Seisei. The verse that says that this thing, Torah Mitzvahs, is Karev, is relevant to you in your mouth, in your speech, B'vavcha in your heart, and B'mela Seisei, your actions. These three are often referred to thought, speech, and action. You can also say it's connected to Torah Vedic Gemilas Chasadim. Torah is thought, learning. Levavcha is heart. And learning with the mind is also beficha. You speak with the bartabom, with the heart of prayer. And laseise, maisim tevim, Gemilas Chasadim. Eichu karev ma'ed. Come to explain in the Vayet Heitev how it's karev, how is it indeed relevant. So part of any battle and every war is also the psychological part of us focusing and aligning and mobilizing our faculties to be directed toward achieving the intended goal. And when you're talking about nishmosa deraisa, primus atera, you're talking about a tremendous power, the neshamadika power, that's far more stronger than any material force. And all that comes together and gives us strength in times like this. How can we improve our prayers based on the last section in Tanya? So that we answered that question just before. Just see if there's any other questions about this part, this section. I think that covers that. So now let's move to Chanukah. Obviously much more can be said, but in our brief time here, let's try to concentrate things. So how does Chanukah provide us with strength and direction in these trying times? And the answer is exactly the same idea. And that's why indeed Chanukah comes right after Yud Tes Kislev. I mentioned before that Zayis, the oil, and that's what Chanukah is. We celebrate through the oil, through the miracle of the oil that was preserved after a war, after the defiling and the desecration of the temple and the menorah and the altar and the mizbeach. And they found one crucible of pure olive oil. And that shined and that was lit and burned for 8 days miraculously. So the question Chassidus asks, but Chanukah was a battle, there was a war. There's the Maccabees against Antiochus and the Greeks. It was an actual war. That's why we say in Allah Nisim, Rabim biyad ma'atim, the many fell into the hands of the few. Geberim biyad chaloshim, the mighty into the hands of the weaker. It was a real battle. A mulchama. So why don't we make there's no mention of any war. How do we do it? We talk about something that was a result of the war. Because they won the war, they were able to then cleanse and clean up and rededicate the temple and light the menorah. Says the Alter Rebbe, the Balagula of Yud Tes Kislev. Because what was the war about? The war was about K'nei Mitzvah V'Teira Eir. It wasn't a war over the Gashmis. It says in Levush that Purim, Haman wanted to kill the Jews b'Gashmis, Rachmana litzlan. The war there was not a war to kill Jews. They wanted to kill the spirit of Jews. Lashkicham Teira Secha. No problem, you have Teira. Wisdom, philosophy, ideology. But Teira Secha, why are you making it holy? The pure olive oil, that's holy, untouched. Lavira mechuke ritzenecha. To have them wander off with this way, to leave and abandon, not just mitzvahs as moral, ethical laws, but mechuke ritzenecha. That is God's will. They wanted to eliminate the God part. So it was a ruchnizdika war. The war was about light, about ner mitzvah v'teireh, the candle of a mitzvah and the light of teireh. So that's why it's not incidental. That was what the war was about. That's why we honor it by lighting the flames. What is it? How does it translate in our times today? Something I've emphasized in the previous programs. We are not here just to fight an enemy and eliminate an enemy. That's not the reason that neshama came down to this world, is to eliminate darkness and eliminate hostile forces that are hostile to God. That's step one. We're here to transform the world into a world of light and love and godliness, a world of Mashiach and Geula. To do that, there are times that you have to actually fight an actual battle and war and everything that comes with it. But the goal is Padah B'shalom Nafshi. Like you see a flame. A flame doesn't go to war with darkness. A little light dispels darkness automatically. It's not like fire and water, two adversarial forces. Enough water can extinguish the greatest fire, and enough fire can evaporate great bodies of water. There's a struggle, there's a battle. Light, a dark room, turn on light a candle, automatically, naturally, it will dispel the darkness in that area. If it's a large room, you need more light. Our goal is to bring light into this world. There are times that you have forces that don't allow you to do so. So obviously you need to deal with that. But the ultimate goal is a goal of the Chanukah goal, a menorah that will shine through the entire world with ner mitzvah v'teira er. So it's also a lesson that we're not just fighting an enemy, we're also fighting for something that transcends the enemy, that's even greater and stronger. That's where our passion is. So you need to stop the bleeding, like in any situation, but then you want to bring health into the picture. You don't just want to go back to square one. You don't just want damage control. You want to build a better world. And that's what we fight for, and that's what Jews have always fought for from the beginning of time. Like I said earlier, the Alter Rebbe didn't just continue what he was doing. He did it with far more elaboration and far more fervor and passion and expansiveness. That's the only way we redeem those short moments, those temporary moments of pain. Not just we eliminated it, we redeem it, that the pain ultimately led to greater good, to greater light. And that's why you find Chanukah in so many ways, even though it was rededicating the menorah in the temple. But look, it has differences. The menorah in the temple had 7 candles, had 7 branches. Chanukah we light 8. The menorah in the temple was lit in the morning, Chanukah we light in the evening. The menorah was lit inside the temple. Chanukah we light al Pesach Beisim Bachutz, by the door going outward. Because all these things indicate not just to return the light that was there that they had desecrated, the Greeks, the Syrians, but that you create even more light. 8, not just 7. The transcendent number, Shemer Sahekev. We can illuminate the darkness. And in the evening, Mishatishka Chama, when the sun sets, which also represents a darker state of being, a darker state of consciousness. So, and the Ramban says, those amazing words, in Pasha Ba'alescha, that the menorah, even though it was a ner tamid, an eternal flame, ultimately was extinguished, tragically, when the temple was destroyed. Haval haneres halolu. But these candles of Chanukah, einam b'teilan le'elam. They never disappear. We've continued to light them for all these thousands of years, even after the temple was destroyed. You could say, but the menorah of Chanukah is only coming to renew or rededicate the menorah that was there already. And yet it becomes stronger because the darkness makes it stronger. So our enemies, our adversaries, our challenges, the more you challenge, the more we blossom, the more we thrive. That's the story. So Chanukah has obviously tremendous lessons. And I would encourage everyone to share them with everyone you meet. And I hope people in the military, the IDF and Sahal are listening to this. I hope they hear it from other messages as well. But that's what needs to ring this Chanukah. The message of that powerful light, the powerful light that cannot be destroyed, that cannot be eliminated. It continues to burn as we see, and will continue to burn forever into Mashiach and Geula, and then it will be a permanent. And the Beis HaMikdash will be renewed, and the menorah then will be a ner tamid forever. Now about Chanukah, a bunch of questions came in, some relating to the war, some not so related, but let me go through a few of them. Being that next week is also Chanukah, so I'll leave some for next week. I'm going to cover everything, again, due to time limitations. So, let's read a few. Question was asked, what is the spiritual difference between the wick, the oil, and the flame they produce? There are many teachings of Chassidus that use the analogy of how wick and oil work together to produce a flame to explain what our souls accomplish when we do mitzvahs. Can we ask Rabbi Jacobson to please expound on this and explain it in simple terms? Thank you. Well, indeed, as you may know, I give a class every morning, 9:30 Eastern Time, on Sundays 10 a.m., which you're all welcome to participate in. It's live on Zoom and YouTube. You go to ChassidusSupply.com and you'll find the details. So I'm actually learning my morim about this topic, a mimer from the Alter Rebbe, Mik Hashem Elokeinu, Hamagbir L'Shavas, a mimer that he said Chanukah in the year Tov Kuf Samach Vov, which is the equivalent of 1795. 1805. And then there's a mimer of the Alter Rebbe, and upon that is based the end of Hemshech Hayim Beis. And just briefly, there he talks about, one of the ways he explains it, that the wick is the divine soul as it manifests in the body and in this physical world. The body and animal soul and the physical world. The oil, interestingly, is the wisdom, the intelligence, chokhmah, of the nefesh habamis, human intelligence. And the goal is for the divine soul to educate and train and harness the oil, that wisdom, human intelligence, to godliness instead of to its own self-interest. And create v'haftas Hashem l'kecha b'chol levavcha b'shnei yitzarecha, b'chol levavcha b'shnei, with both sides of your heart, the right and the left. And that creates the flame, Ner Hashem nishmas adam, the flame of the divine, combination of the wick of the nefesh elikis, drawing, literally drawing, as we know. It absorbs the oil, and through that creates the flame. There are other explanations given as well, but that's one. So when we begin to bench Chanukah, when we begin to celebrate and bench Chanukah licht, Friedrich Rebbe's words, was the lichtelech erzählen. We need to listen to what the flames tell us. They tell us many messages, and these are some of them. And again, relevant to our time. So study it. You look at the menorah, you see the light's power over darkness. You see the transformation of oil that could have gone in any direction being used to become a mitzvah. And then Ner mitzvah v'tereir, as he explains, adds to that. That's what I said what I said till now is what he explained, how he explains the neshama on its own. Then the neshama armed with a mitzvah, with mitzvahs, ner mitzvah. And the tereir creates not just a ner, but also a eir, all the way to eir sof lifnei atzimtzum, the highest possible divine energy, all generated from below. So that's one application. Okay. Another question is, can God make miracles? Can God make miracles as he has done in past wars, or does he want us to do the fighting ourselves? Well, look, in Chanukah there was a war. Of course God can make miracles, and he did make miracles, but many of these miracles are giving us the power to do what we have to do. We're not winning the war on our own. But Hashem wants, for whatever reason, that we should use our resources to fight the war with God's koyach. So there are times where Hashem just did the battle himself. But that's rarer times. In general, it goes more that there's a partnership here. Hashem gives us the koyach to fight. We fight, we do our part, and Hashem blesses that we should be victorious. But you went out to war, and you waged war with the power that God gives us. That's how it was in Chanukah. Alter Rebbe too. He ended up in prison. God didn't just prevent it. But ultimately, it all worked its way out through the human effort that was blessed and was infused with God's power. Okay. Another question, is the current war closer to what happened on Chanukah or Purim? Is the current war and worldwide rise in anti-Semitism closer to what happened to us on Purim when our enemies wanted to kill us physically? or closer to what happened to us on Chanukah when our enemies wanted only to destroy us spiritually, as I mentioned before from the Lavush. I think the answer is quite obvious. Unfortunately, we see what's happened. Actual people were killed. So this is not a spiritual war alone. It's rooted perhaps in a spiritual war. Not perhaps, but definitely. But it's not just an idea. It's not just as it was Chanukah. So in that sense, it's more Purim-like in that sense, because Haman wanted to exterminate all the Jewish people. So just to answer that question. Another question is, as I said, I'll cover some other of the details later, maybe next week's class. Is there a connection between Chassidus and the oil we use to light the menorah? Okay. Answer is absolutely yes. And someone else writes, in some places Torah is compared to water and Chassidus is compared to oil, Pnimis HaTorah. Is there, and sometimes actually Nigla Torah can also sometimes be compared to Lecha. I mean, there are different examples, but fine. Is there a connection between Chassidus and the oil we use to light the menorah? The answer is yes. Firstly, on a very basic level, in order to produce oil, fresh new oil, Shem Messiah is pure olive oil, you need to dig deeper. And that's what Chanukah did, and that's what Yud Tes Kislev did. Secondly, the fact that they come right near each other as an indicator of that. Because oil in spirit on the spiritual realms is the idea of Pnimis HaTorah, Razik derive, the secrets of the secrets. Wine is sometimes compared to the secrets, and oil is the secrets of the secrets. And the connection is, again, it's the darkness that brings out this deepest level of neshama. Der Hashem Nishmas Adam, the flame of the soul, the oil that feeds it. Okay, and there are many sikhs and letters from the Rebbe that explain the commonality. So let's move now to another question, which will be a segue to the next section of this discussion here. Are the turncoat Jewish women marching with Hamas supporters a reincarnation of Miriam Bas Bilga? To be more specific, Miriam Bas Bilga helped lead the Greeks into the Beis Hamikdash and told them the best ways to defile the Holy Temple and to inflict maximum damage. So the question is asking, is this, you see people marching? In fact, not just women, it's also men. So the truth is, these are questions that came in 7 weeks ago when the war began about, well, how do we look at these people? And I have them like sitting right in front of me. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I didn't want to go there. So I feel, but we have to go there because it's a reality on the ground. How do you deal with that? How do you look at it? Now, we all know the famous sikh of the Rebbe with Miriam Bas Bilga, that despite the fact, yes, that she went to the Greeks and all of that, but still, the Pintel Yid remained alive, and that's why when she saw the humiliation, she saw what was happening to the Jews, he said, Lucas, talking to the Mizbeach, how could you not protect the Jewish people? Famous sikh from Vav Tishrei Tov Shin Lamed Hey. We hope and pray that those people who are misguided, just put it mildly, should also come to realize what a Jew is. And we just hope that our enemies don't remind them. But what you're seeing is, yes, people can fall very far. And we'll talk about that more, maybe today, in later programs. Hopefully I never have to talk about it. But it's an unfortunate fact. You have Jewish people who, for the life of me, I can't understand. Fine, you want to say that there's some things you want to criticize Jews about, Israel about. But to go up to the extent of literally like siding with the enemy, with Hamas, like with Nazis, is just beyond me. But you could bring this example. But then we have the other side of the coin. And let's talk about that now. Who is today's Yehudis? Another woman. Part of the victory of Chanukah was because one of the bravery of Yehudis who snuck into the tent of the Greek general, and after he passed out from drinking too much wine, she chopped off his head, and that demoralized his troops, and the Maccabees were then able to defeat them. Who is today's Yehudis that will sneak into the tunnel of the Hamas commander and chop off his head? Well, there are many ways to chop off the head of an enemy. There's the chopping off physically. There's also the chopping off spiritually. It says, "B'schus nashim tzidkonis nigula v'senim mitzrayim." The merit of the righteous women, the Jews were redeemed from Egypt. Yet another battle and war. And we're told that b'schus nashim tzidkonis, in the last generation, before Geula, they will be in their merit, Mashiach will come. So you could definitely say, we can take a lesson from Chanukah, that the women take the lead role. Those that are in Ebach sadly lost or misguided or brainwashed, nope. Hopefully we'll get to help them to clear up their heads and figure out what the truth is. But meanwhile, who brings light into this world every Erev Shabbos and Erev Yom Tov? It is the women and the girls of this world. So the Yehudis is each woman and girl on this planet. Jewish woman and girl in Eretz Yisrael, all over the world, that you're davening, especially you're lighting candles, coupled with the candles of Chanukah, have the power to cut off and chop off the head of our enemies. Because light dispels darkness. So, militarily, we'll see how it works itself out. But that doesn't absolve us from our responsibility. Because the more you bring Kedusha into the world, the more it chokes the opposite. It does not allow that to have oxygen to breathe. The language of Chassidus, Yenikas HaChetzenim, comes when the Chetzenim, the negative, the evil, is feeding off from the Kedusha. So the more Kedusha you bring, you shine a light, what happens? The maggots run away. So that's the way you behead the enemy in our times. And that can counter the Miriam Bas Bilgos that may exist. Okay. Is there a connection in all this to Mashiach? Absolutely. First of all, we've always been waiting for Mashiach, and everything is leading to Mashiach. But especially now, the Rebbe's words 30 years ago, that were at the threshold, and quoting Midrashim, Higiz man gulaschem. So how much more so now? I understand the question, why didn't it happen then, and how are we so sure? Well, we will reach there, and every minute is a minute closer. And when you know behind the scenes, what it says in the Zoyas and the Midrashim and the Balaturim, and we've quoted quite a few of these places, that at the end of the time there'll be battles with Bnei Yishmael, as there were battles with Bnei Esav, and there will be pain and grief and fear. But then, Abish will say, Bnei Alter Rebbe, don't be afraid, because I did everything, I did it for you. Higias man gulaschem. So they'll question all this is about, the last residue, if you wish, the last remnants of the sparks that have to be elevated, that precedes the Gula. Like the Balaturim writes, and then the Chayis, Pasha Chayis Sora. Nofal, he talks about Yishmael, and then Elatel is Yitzchak. That from that will give birth to Mashiach, who comes from Bnei Yitzchak. So someone writes, should the fact that we are in exile, my mistake. No, that's not the question. The question, should freeing the hostages and winning the war take precedent over doing all we can to bring Mashiach? Am I wrong for feeling that I would rather see all the hostages safe and returned before I see Mashiach? Mashiach is a spiritual sublime concept that I have more difficult time relating to than actual human beings who are suffering in captivity. Well, my dear friend, Talia. What do you think Mashiach is? No, it's not just a sublime concept. Mashiach is a world that's aligned with godliness. And a world aligned with godliness, all hostages are freed. So it's hand in hand. It's not like, okay, we'll fight a war, free hostages, and then when we have a little free time, we'll talk about Mashiach. The coming of Mashiach goes hand in hand with all of this. That doesn't mean we don't have to do what we have to do, fight a war, the details, free hostages, absolutely. But Mashiach comes right now, all that will be resolved. Padah B'shalom. And when we do what we have to do, the other way around, we speed up the coming of Mashiach, because that's what Mashiach is about. Emes, truth, justice, what God wants, not what people want. So I see it as hand in hand. If you're so passionate about it, that's exactly what Mashiach is. Maybe you need to read or learn about it more. But that's what Mashiach is about. That's why the Rambam describes what's Mashiach. A time there'll be no war, there'll be no famine. Lo yarei v'lo yashchisu, there'll be no destruction and evil and destruction. Because the world will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. What's the connection? Waters cover the divine knowledge? That's very sublime, Ruchnius. But Ruchnius affects Gashmius. Because that's the whole point, is to bring godliness into this world. And this too deserves its own discussion. And I have many questions about the end of day, so to speak, how the story ends, all connected to Gula. But as I said, we'll have to pace it and cover some of the things that are more timely and fundamental, and then hopefully I can cover it the next week or next weeks. So let's go now to Parshas HaShavua. Lemid the Tzeit. So in addition to Yud Tes Kislev and Chanukah, we also have the Parsha. So we start reading Parsha Vayeshev. And here, Bikesh Yaakov Leishav B'Shalva. After all these wars and the pain, they first he dealt with Esav, and then Lavan and Charan, and then again Esav. Finally now Vayeshev Yaakov. Yaakov returns to Be'er Sheva. Bikesh Yaakov wants to live in peace. How much can a person fight? No, but it was not meant to be. As Rashi explains, the world is not yet at peace. Mashiach hasn't come yet. And Koftzalov Rugze Shel Yosef. Koftzalov. What consumed, the Koftzah means that it like jumped on him. Like almost like a surprise, sudden, yet another tragedy. Where his son Yosef is taken from Yaakov, thinking Yosef was killed, when in truth he was sold by his brothers to whom? Yishmaelim. Yeah, Yishmael is making a reappearance. A Jew sold Yishmaelim. By Yosef Hurid Mitzrayim. We'd go down to Mitzrayim, Mitzrayim v'Gvulim, the limitations and the constraints and the fears and insecurities of existence, with a goal that he would ultimately become after being in prison as well, like the Alter Rebbe, or like Alter Rebbe, like Yosef. And he would become El L'Gedula, he'd become Mishnah L'Melech, the viceroy of Egypt, would turn Egypt into a superpower. And with that, the nation of Am Yisrael, the Shivim Nefesh, would come down with Yaakov and ultimately to Golus Mitzrayim, but then Geula, Yitzias Mitzrayim, and Eden became a nation, marching to Matan Torah, to Eretz Yisrael. So the story continues. You read it, it's pretty straightforward. Yet another battle. This time, it's between Tzaddikim. Yaakov and Esav, Esav was Esav. Yishmael and Yitzchak. Here's Mitase Shlema, they're all Shvatim. And still, the Gula is not here yet. Disunity. There are many explanations given. How could they do such a thing? It's called Markavta Tato. They were a Markava of Elam Abriya de Shvatim. Shifte Yudke. So clearly it wasn't just plain petty jealousy. It was deeper than that. But still, the end of the story, they will reconcile 22 years later. But in this parsha we hear about the pain. So it's very fitting to the events that we are experiencing now. But we have to remember the end of the story is going to be a good one. Like when they finally reconcile in Parsha Vayigash. And it's interesting. Yaakov and Esav, their battles begin in Teldis. Then we go through Vayetze, and 2 parshas later, Vayishlach, they reconcile. Here too, Vayeshev begins their alienation, then goes through Miketz, and in Vayigash, 2 chapters later, they reunite. And as the Haftarah there tells us, that it will reflect the reunion that will happen when Mashiach comes, Eitz Yosef and Eitz Yehuda, V'Nasi, Avdi Nasi Aleim La'elam, when Mashiach will rise, and everyone will be reunited in the fullest sense of the word. So the battles rage on in this week's Passion. So it also teaches us that there are difficulties. Yosef is thrown into a pit, and he's sold to Yishmaelim. What's the significance of that? The significance of it is when the Eden, the Shvatim, didn't appreciate who Yosef was, and they, with all their justifications, that Yosef had incited them, that Yosef was going against what Mashiach is supposed to be, because Yehuda, Melech Beis David comes from Yehuda, and here he's sharing his dreams, how he will be a leader. So there were reasons, as the Shalah explains and others explain. But still, they left a child, a 70-year-old boy, their father's son, their brother, in a pit. And they let Yishmaelim, buy him, take him hostage. Literally, take him hostage. It's part of what Golus is. But we know Golu, le'edem shchinei ma, where Eid goes and Golus, the Eibishter goes with him. And the Eibishter went, Ish Matzliach he was. He was a successful man because the Eibishter was with him. And ultimately, if you look at the whole story, it would lead to greatness. But at the time, it was a very difficult one. We were exiled from our land, and Yishmael has taken over at times throughout history. The Ottoman Empire, the different empires. But at the end of the day, the Eibishter, this is your promise. I promised you this land, Eretz Yisrael, Am Yisrael, and that will be fulfilled. So the battles that we're seeing today with Yishmael, with Bnei Yishmael, immediately evokes the battles that were going on back then in the home of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yishmael, and now Bnei Yishmael taking Yosef hostage. But the end is that he's redeemed, and he becomes not just redeemed, becomes the leader, the Mishnah Lamel, the viceroy of Egypt. Okay, so somebody else asked a question regarding the Parsha. Let us see here. What can we learn from the fact that they sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites? So, I just shared that. We know that the Golus is Golus of Bnei Esav, there's Bnei Yishmael, and the Eden were in both different Golias. So this is part of the Golus in Bnei Yishmael. So one asks, could the Palestinians be upset because they purchased Yosef as a slave from his 11 brothers? And Halacha says all the property of a slave belongs to his owner, so maybe they feel the portion of Israel that went to Yosef, Ephraim, and Manasseh should really belong to them. I'm smiling. I mean, it's really sad. No, first of all, I do not think that there's anyone in their conscious right mind from that world that is claiming that. They claim it for whatever distorted reasons. And I don't want to feed them with another argument that they'll say this. But remember, Eretz Yisrael was given to the Eden by the Eibishter, and it can't be taken away by anybody. So the fact that he was sold as a slave does not suddenly take away and give them a right in the promised land. That's just to state a basic thing. But I appreciate it, I understand the point, but it does bring to light the connection that we can apply when we're challenged by Shmuel in one way or another, and where the end story will be in a beautiful fashion. Okay. So let's see here. What else are we going to cover? So much. So let's talk about actions. There have been a number of questions that came in about people's actions, things we can do. So let's do it. How does separating challah help in times like this? So nice. What is it about the ceremony of separating challah dough that yields miraculous results? Over the past few weeks, there are a few stories where people convinced families of hostages to do this ceremony. And at the exact moment the women were separating the dough, they got phone calls that their loved ones were rescued and set free. Well, firstly, every mitzvah has power. But especially the mitzvah of challah, so one of the reasons that we do the mitzvah of challah is a tikkun for chet eitz hadas. One of the opinions is that the eitz hadas, the tree of knowledge, was made of wheat. And since Chava was a participant in this dissonance of eating from the tree of knowledge, so the way it is misaken is that she is given specifically this mitzvah of challah. The same is interesting said about all the three mitzvahs that women that are unique to women. Challah, the Rosh Hashanah is Chana. Challah nida hadlokas neiris, or hachein, that neir, because she extinguished a light. So one of the tikkun is to ignite light. And the third is like the Pasuk says, that because what you did, Chava, she would suffer birth pains. Nida, the monthly cycle that's connected to purifying even after a potential life could have emerged. And what is the significance of challah? Is to reconnect. You ate from a tree, in this opinion, that according to this opinion was wheat, because you wanted to get to feel or know what God knows. So you created a certain separation between your identity and the divine, a dissonance. So now take challah and remember God. Take a challah, the first, when you speak the challah, it's not yours. It's not keichev eitzim yadi. Like we take the first fruit. We show that the challah that we're going to eat is not ours. So it's realigning and reconnecting to the divine. So it's not a surprise that when you have this schism that has led to such horrible atrocities and hostage taking and all that comes with it, that a mitzvah like this reconnects. Now you'll say, 1 second, so why are not all the hostages released? We don't know God's ways. We have to do our part, and everything we do brings more light and more goodness into this world. So I don't know the details of the story, but if indeed is correct, not surprising in that sense. Someone else writes, as far as actions go, would it be appropriate for couples to daven and ask for brachas for having more children in order to make up for the 1,200 people killed by Hamas? Well, the mitzvah of having children is a mitzvah regardless. Does it add a certain gravitas? Does it add a certain, just like we know after Rahman al-Islam, the 6 million were killed, we understood, everyone understood in their heart that we have to become stronger Jews. And we now have to compensate for the empty chairs, for the empty space that they left. Does that include having children? Absolutely. But I wouldn't make a declaration now, and let's go on a campaign, people should have more children. If you feel that way personally, definitely very beautiful. When you hear about some of the people who were killed and the children that were born the last few weeks were named after some of those lost. How could you not cry for that? Jews recognizing, remembering, and naming perfect strangers. But they're not strangers, they're our family. So in that sense, it's an unbelievable schus. So my answer, of course. But again, I'm not saying it like in a formal way, just simply something more personal that all of us can, those that are able to do. But above all, it's not just bringing children to this world. It's bringing children that will be proud Jews. Educate them. Inspire them. They should be ambassadors of light. They should be walking menorahs that illuminate everything in their path and dispel all darkness. Dear Rabbi Jacobs, another question in actions. Thank you for providing So much content as well as clarity. A short while ago, a group trip of the Chassidus family to the oil, things started moving and so many of them, of the Chassidus, came out, Baruch Hashem. Can we attribute their liberation to the Rebbe's bracha? I understand that the Rebbe wouldn't necessarily be in favor of the deal, but the return of 100 plus of the Chassidus alive, Baruch Hashem, some 50 days into captivity, is nothing short than a miracle. Thank you. And may we see the return of all of them with the coming of Mashiach immediately. Amen. Look, we Jews believe in prayer. We believe we go to that oil of a tzaddik, of a Rebbe, who cries for us and prays for us and beseeches for us with God, will have an effect. I cannot, for one, know exactly, and I don't think anyone knows, what button you press that creates such a result. We all celebrate that every person who came out from this hell and was redeemed, reunited with their family, intact, have to go through whatever they have to go through to heal from the trauma. So of course it's a tremendous celebration. And yes, you can say thank you. It's very possible the prayers there did it. But I don't want to put it, but what about the millions of prayers that Jews are doing all over the world, and the Tehillim, and the Tzedakah, and the love, and the kindness? So I think accumulatively, all of it is going to have its effect. Like we said, there's the military war, there's the spiritual war, and we need both. So that would be my general response to that question. Okay? And with that, let us sum up. Bottom line is, as I began, Kol ha'esek b'teira, Vedic Gemilas Chasadim, is Poda'ani, Kilo Poda'ani, Lebonai, like they redeem me, Padah B'shalom Nafshi, Mikrovli. So we have our work cut out for us. We have to be proactive, not just do it ourselves, influence others, inspire others, including Sheva Mitzvah Neach for the entire world, to embrace the principles that the Eibishter gave us all, to live a life that we turn this jungle into a garden. And to derive betachtenim, the gula amitis v'ashlema, and with the power of Yud Tes Kislev and the power of Chanukah, we have additional strengths and resources to finally cross the finish line. The gula amitis v'ashlema will be ruach hatuma aver min haaretz, the toxins, the spirit of spiritual impurity and all impurity will be removed from this world. Lo yirei v'lo yashchisu v'chol har kodshi, there will be no longer evil and destruction, because kimola haaretz deis Hashem k'mayim liyom mechasim, because the light of the mayonesecha, of the well springs, will saturate and completely fill the world like the waters cover the sea. So maybe use the strength of Yud Tes Kislev and the strength of Chanukah to that effect. As I said, Hashem should protect especially in the Eretz Asherini Hashem Elokecha B'Mereshis Hashanah B'Achli Shana. We should march in the Padah B'shalom Nafshi, the permanent Padah B'shalom of the Gula Amitis V'Ashlema. This has been My Life Chassidus Applied. We're here every Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m. So I'll continue Afreilich and Yontif of Yud Tes Kislev and Chav Kislev, and from that let's march into Afreilich and Chanukah, Afreilich and Tamid, forever and ever. Light those candles like we never lit them before. Let us publicly proclaim it with public menatus, again like never before. This is the light of Torah, this is the light of mitzvah, this is the light of a Jewish people. That not only will not be hurt, but we will demonstrate that light will shine and encompass and transform the entire universe. Be well. Afreilich and Yontif again, Afreilich and Chanukah.
This program is brought to you by My Life, Chassidus Applied. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at chassidusapply.com/donate.